I was asking about the meaning of life. Why are we here? What are we supposed to do with this existence? You have to look for another kind of happiness, and that is a spiritual happiness. You can take that deeper and deeper and deeper until you reach a state of happiness and satisfaction that is so profound that actually you don't want anything else in the whole world.
Do you have any idea what would Buddha say in 2026 if he would see the social media world?
If you are kind to somebody, you feel good about yourself. If you are nasty to somebody, you tend to feel bad about yourself afterwards. And that is really what karma in Buddhism is about. If you live a long life and all you do is good, at the end of your life, you have actually raised your consciousness up compared to where you started out when you were born into this world. And of course, if you are going to be reborn with a mind that is higher up than when you started out, you will be reborn at that new level. You realize that the person you are is not so much because of your parent, but because of who you were in a past life. And then you can just spend a short time using this kind of mantra, yeah? May all beings be happy, yeah? May all beings be well. You have to mean it. If you don't mean it, it's not going to work. You can't just say it like a parrot. It has to come from your heart. After a while, it gives sense to this very beautiful feeling. When I go on the street in India and I see these poor people, I could have been reborn here. And in the future, I may get reborn here.
Do you ever wonder who have you been in the past? Today, my guest is Ajahn Brahmali. I said it correctly?
Absolutely, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay,
perfect.
fine.
Yeah.
So we are off to a good start. I'm glad because I was a little bit stressed about this part. And we are gonna talk about Buddhism and what's going on at the moment, especially in Poland and in Europe, which we a little bit briefly talked about before we started recording. But I wanted to start off the question about the Theravada, because Buddhism can be, I mean, from what I understand, and I told you that I don't know so much about Buddhism, but there are many different forms of Buddhism. So if you could explain for us, people who don't know anything about the Buddhism, what is actually Theravada Buddhism about?
Okay, so there are kind of three main branches of Buddhism. Theravada is one. Another one is called Mahayana, which means basically the great vehicle. And then there's Vajrayana. Vajrayana is basically the Tibetan kind of Buddhism. And so Theravada is the one you find in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, these kind of places. And it's all based on a set of texts called the Pali texts. And this is, the Pali texts have the advantage of being what is the closest to the word of the Buddha himself that we have available. And so basically it's based on the idea of the word of the Buddha. Of course, 2,500 years of history means it's much more than that, but basically it's the word of the Buddha that we try to deal with in Theravada Buddhism.
Because, you know, when I had a bit of a conversation with AI about all of it, because obviously we are using a lot of AI these days to get some informations. And when I spoke about this particular form of Buddhism, what came across was that this is kind of like the closest to what you said, Buddha himself, but also like kind of science of Buddhism, that it's very science-based comparing to some other forms of Buddhism.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of the thing about religion, I think, and spirituality in general, is that there is kind of faith-based religion, and then there's experience-based religion. And if it is experience-based, it's closer to science, because science is about understanding the world, but from an inner perspective rather than an outer perspective. So we can talk about third-person science or first-person science. Third person is a typical science where you go to the lab and then you replicate the results, a third party replicates it. First-person science would be where you go from inner experience and understand the world from that point of view. And so what happens in Buddhism is that the Buddha goes first. He has a very profound experience of reality, and then we try to replicate that in our own internal experience after the Buddha. He says, this is what you can experience, and then we say, okay, well, that sounds really cool, yeah, would like to experience some of that, please, yeah, happiness sounds good, contentment sounds good, and so you try to replicate that in your own life. So there is as you say, there is a close connection, and you could say that the connection between science and experienceable or experience-based spirituality is that it is about evidence, it's about reality, it's about nature, it's about truth, basically. Yeah.
But would you yourself describe Buddhism itself as religion? Because I know that there's different people say different things. Some of them, they are saying that it's more of like philosophy of life than the others, that it's like just some kind of spirituality, but you wouldn't say it's religion. Like different people have different opinion about it. And I'm thinking also from the perspective of like very religious country that Poland is, that of course, like looking at what is happening right now, more and more people is drawn towards spirituality, even if they are religious and even if they are like Catholic. So this is kind of interesting that there are even people who are trying to connect it together.
Yeah. I think there is a big difference there. Is it religion? What exactly is it? I was basically an atheist before I became a Buddhist.
And you were like studying engineering, right? So this is kind of like, it feels like totally opposite.
Buddhism is like is engineering of the mind in a sense. Yeah. So it is a kind of engineering. So, but it's a very interesting point, because I've often asked this particular question: what exactly is Buddhism? Is it a religion or whatever? And the answer is that it is many different things depending on who you ask and depending on how you live your life. And so you can live Buddhism as a religion, and many people do that, and they will pray to the Buddha, and they will do all kind of rituals and all kind of things, and they will kind of make merit to kind of have good luck for the future and all of these kind of things. And this is a very common part of Buddhism. So many people live it as if it is a religion. Other people live it as if it is a philosophy. Yeah, it is a way of kind of thinking about the world or thinking about life. And much of the later Buddhism that came after the Buddha was to create philosophical systems to understand the world based on the teachings of the Buddha. But it wasn't really quite the teaching of the Buddha. It was an expansion of that, a systematization of that to make it into a philosophical system. But I would argue that the earliest teaching of the Buddha himself is neither religion nor is it philosophy, but it is more like psychology here, because it is about understanding the mind. It's about finding happiness in the world. It's about avoiding suffering. It's about finding compassion, contentment, and these are all mental things. Yeah, these are things you develop in the mind. So I would argue it's a kind of psychology at the end of the day, and that to me is the closest description you have of the Buddhist teachings.
That would explain why so many atheists are like drawn to it, because even me myself, when I was reading about it yesterday, I was like, yeah, that's something this is something what is close to home, you know? It didn't feel like any other religion, which for me it feels very foreign. So maybe that's why, because of the description which you made. But I was wondering, going back a little bit to yourself, how does it happen that one who is studying engineering and finance goes and become a monk?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a very interesting question. And to be honest with you, the answer is not very simple. It's not a simple answer at all, actually. But I think one of the main drivers was that I was studying finance in London, and I wasn't very happy with it. I looked at the people around me, what kind of people they were, what kind of lives they had. And they were lives driven by things that to me didn't have much value. They didn't have much meaning. It didn't have much profundity. It was a superficial enjoyment of money and pleasures of the world. But I felt I can't just live like that. If I just live like that, I always feel like I'm kind of skimming the surface of life, never getting to the core of what life really is about. And so I went back to some ideas that I had when I was much younger. When I was much younger, I did some meditation practice, and I had some very good results in meditation when I was young. This was when I was doing my first degree of engineering. And one of my friends gave me a book that was about meditation practice. He said, "Oh, here's a book." And he kind of threw me the book. I said, "Okay, thank you." And so I started reading the book, and I did some meditation. I had some really nice results. And that is the most important thing, because when you have results, you start to understand what is possible, what actually is available. And I compared that to my kind of dissatisfaction with, living the life or kind of being around people who are much more superficial engagement with life. And I thought, no, I'm not interested in this. I want to do something more profound. And that was at that time, I wasn't very happy at that time, to be honest with you. Life felt unstable and unsatisfying in many different ways. And so I decided to go to the nearest Buddhist monastery to check it out. There was something deep inside of me that told me I should do that. But I have no idea where to go. And you will be very surprised at how I found my first Buddhist monastery.
How was it?
I'll tell you. This was in the days before the internet. This was back in the early 1990s, 93 or thereabouts. There was the time of the telephone directories. You remember those directories? The big fat books.
Yes.
And everything is an alphabet, and you have the telephone number at the end. And so I went into this book, and I went to BUDD, and I found Buddhist Society of London. And so I picked up the telephone and I called them and said, "Oh, Buddhist, are there any monasteries around here I can visit?" And they said, "Oh, there are these really nice monasteries outside of London." And these turned out to be really, really good monasteries in the Theravada tradition, part of what is known as the forest tradition. The forest tradition is where they take meditation very seriously and the whole Buddhist practice very seriously. And so I went there and I thought, this is pretty cool. And so I stayed there for a while. And that's kind of how I ended up in a Buddhist monastery. This was outside of London where I went at that time. That's kind of how I went. That's a simple part of the story. But there's also a much deeper aspect of that story, which I think is much more interesting. But I will allow you to lead the conversation.
But that's the thing, like, that's what I wanted to ask you. And you actually kind of brought it up yourself. So, because I can imagine that even if you thought, if the first impression or like first few impression was like, that's amazing. And even though you weren't like satisfied with the life you were living, that's what I wanted to ask. Was it anyway, like anyhow difficult? Because, you're going from living busy life. I don't think you can get much busier than living in London. I used to live in London myself as well. So I kind of know how it is to changing your life completely. So I'm thinking, was it difficult change?
Yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult because, as you say, the perception is so incredibly different. Yeah, from going from a very worldly kind of existence, very busy existence, an existence with, I went to nightclubs and all these kind of things, obviously, sometimes. And I used to drink before I became a Buddhist monk. Not a lot, but I used to drink a little bit. And so there was a whole shift, kind of a radical shift. However, because I already had some experiences from before with meditation, and because I had already traveled to Asia, I traveled to Asia when I was 21. I was on an exchange program, and that's actually where I met Buddhism the first time. So that's kind of left also a very powerful imprint on my mind. Yeah, so I traveled to Japan. And while I was there, I was staying in a hotel because, you have to travel around, and, they have the night side table on the hotel, and usually in most countries they have the Bible in that night side. So you pull out to find the Bible in there. So I pulled out the drawer, no Bible. There was a Buddhist book there instead. Yeah,
I know. I was flight attendant, so I used to be in Asia as well, and in the hotels a lot. And that's true. Yeah. It's exactly like that.
And isn't that cool? And then so you open this and we're getting that Bible. I'm not all that interested in the Bible, to be honest with you, because I've never really had any affinity towards Christianity of any sort. But there was a Buddhist book, so I opened it up and I started reading, and I had this kind of deep sense of something being familiar. And this is very interesting. Why is that familiar? I never had any. I grew up in Norway, right? Norway is just ice and snow, and there were no Buddhists there when I grew up. Everyone were kind of white faces. Everyone was. Actually, most people didn't have any religion at all. This was kind of Norway at that time when I grew up. And so suddenly you find yourself in this Asian country and there's something familiar. Where does that familiarity come from? Because there was nothing in my background that would suggest I should be familiar with these things. And so I read this book, and there were descriptions there of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and these are kind of the foundational aspects of Buddhist teaching. And it was like, wow, open up an idea, a new reality for me. And then after that, I traveled to some of the ancient capitals of Japan. I went to Kyoto. I went to Nara. Nara is another of the old capitals. I went to some of the monasteries, and I saw some of the monks. I saw some of the Buddha statues that were there. It's enormous Buddha statues. And all of this had a kind of ring of familiarity to me. So that was also part of the story. And then when I came back to Norway, that's when this friend of mine kind of threw me the book about the Dhamma. Yeah, and this is kind of how it kind of came together. So there was all of this conditioning deep down inside of me. And so then when I had to make that choice to go to a monastery, even though it was hard, even though the change was very large, there was already a kind of a strong seed inside of me that wanted to move in that direction.
This is really interesting from like also my perspective, or like I'm guessing, I don't want to say for everyone, but for anyone who consider themselves as an atheist, which you said you've been before you became monk, that even though you are not religious and you don't believe in any religion, most likely because, they probably in some ways they are just not, agreeing with what you're thinking, but you still have quite a lot of questions and, looking for directions in life. And, most of the religions, I guess, answering those questions, like what's happening after we die, and like, what's the purpose in life? Like, what kind of person should I be? So did you feel like you had this questions, or like maybe that was something what was also like drawing you in a way to Buddhism, even though you consider yourself as well as an atheist?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was kind of part of my life from the very beginning, from at least from my teenage years. I was asking about the meaning of life. Why are we here? What are we supposed to do with this existence? Because life seems like a very strange thing. Yeah, you get born into this world. You get an education, and you get married, and you have 2.5 kids and 1.5 dog, and 1.2 cars or whatever. Kind of the average person, and you do all of these things, and then you kind of work really, really hard. You make money, and then you become old, you become a pensioner, and then you die, and you wonder, why? Why? What is this about? What is the purpose of this? Why am I doing all of these things? And some people will say, well, I do this for my children, but then the children go through exactly the same procedure. And so that doesn't really answer the question either. And so you wonder why. There must be something more to life. Otherwise, it seems so hollow, so empty, so pointless in a sense. And so I always had that kind of questioning in me deep down. And, so the question is more, where does that questioning come from in the first place? And of course, one thing is that people are just different because of genetics and because of social upbringing and all of these kind of things. But often I think it's even deeper than that. And that's where you kind of get to the more profound Buddhist ideas at that particular point.
You touched a very interesting thing as well, because all the things you mentioned that we are chasing through our life, because we are living pretty much. This is kind of funny that we are living in the safest and wealthiest times, but I also feel that we've never been so unhappy that we are right now. And this is probably because of that, because we have much more possibilities, but that also means that we want more and more, and we are chasing more and more. So would you say, or like, how would you explain it and describe what's actually the difference between the goals, which we keep putting ourselves on the journey, like, I want to have a new car, I want to have a better paid job, like I want to get married, so on and so forth. And then the purpose, because it kind of sounds similar, but I guess those ones are like totally different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very different. And to understand that, you have to understand that there are different kinds of happiness available in the world. And some kinds of happinesses are really satisfactory and really make you happy in a deep way. Whereas the other kinds of happiness are superficial, and they lead to more search, more moving on, never really satisfaction. And so one of the problems of the ordinary happinesses of the world, the happinesses of enjoying the pleasures of the five senses, going to nice restaurants, having a nice relationship, having nice possessions, and all of these kind of things, is that it never satisfies the minds in a deep way. And so you always have to have more. You always have to move on. You have a nice meal, and then a few hours later you have to have another nice meal, right? And you have a nice car, and initially I think, if I get that nice car, I will be really happy. But after a couple of weeks, you get used to that car. That car is no longer exciting. Then you have to have the next car, one level up. You have a nice apartment or your nice studio like this one, and then you have to have another. After a while, you get used to the studio, and it seems ordinary. And
that's what I did a few months ago, exactly.
Yeah. Right. And so it is never really satisfying in a deep way. And so life, and then you have one relationship, and that relationship, when you fall in love, it's like, it's the most wonderful relationship in the world, and you feel you're on cloud 7, it's just wonderful and marvelous. But soon enough, you kind of get used to each other. Then you start to argue a little bit, and the relationship starts to split apart. And soon enough, you have to kind of let go of your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is. And then you have another relationship, and you never really find the relationship which is the kind of relationship that you had in your dreams when you were a young person. Yeah, that relation just doesn't exist. There is no such thing. Yeah. And so you have to look for another kind of happiness, and that is a spiritual happiness. And the spiritual happiness has a very different kind of feel to it. And to give an example of what spiritual happiness is like, if you are very kind to somebody, you give them something, you do an act of generosity, or you say something to someone coming from your heart, deep down, I really appreciate you, or you do an act of kindness, like giving someone a cup of coffee, like you just did now, but in a more kind of, in a more here is a bit transactional because we're working together, but you do it more purely from a kind of heartfelt space. That action of kindness that comes from there has a very different feeling of happiness from the happiness you get from the worldly things. And what you will notice is that there is no desire there. There is no craving. There's no idea of moving on. You don't need to move on from that happiness to something more. It is a deeply satisfying. And that is the difference between spiritual happiness and worldly happiness. And then if you take that further, if you start to do meditation, for example, you can take that deeper and deeper and deeper until you reach a state of happiness and satisfaction that is so profound that actually you don't want anything else in the whole world. And what is going on there is that there is something we feel incomplete as human beings. We feel that there's something inside of us, like a hole inside of us that needs to be filled. That's one of the reasons why we seek relationships. A relationship, when it is good, it kind of fills that hole a little bit. But actually, it doesn't really fill it, because with filling things with external things means that we are always vulnerable. If that external thing happens to be taken away, then the hole reappears. So the only way to fill that hole inside of us, so that sense of incompleteness inside of us, is to work directly with our own psychology, work directly with your own mind. And that is what the spiritual path is about. It's actually a mental development, the development of the mind. And that's why positive psychology, development of the mind, is basically the same thing as spiritual practice. You can call it a positive kind of psychology, filling up the hollowness inside, give it real meaning, give it real satisfaction and contentment.
That would make so much sense of like why we feel so lonely and empty in some way now in 2026, because more than ever we use those external factors. Because I think back in the days, like I was born in 1990, there was a lot of external already, but nothing compared to what we have right now, because now we have social media. We have not only the things that we can buy, but we can also have the people that they are gonna tell us, like, are we doing something right or wrong, or like, are we looking okay or not? So everything is pretty much based these days on like external factors.
Yeah, I think it is very, very unfortunate. I think it's very bad. I think it's bad for our mental health. I think it's bad for, as you say, and people say we're living in a crisis of meaning at the moment, and this is kind of becoming more and more common understanding in the world right now. This crisis of meaning, and it is, I think, precisely because of what you say, because we live always looking for external feedback, always looking for external things. That crisis of meaning is an inner problem. It can only be dealt with from the inside, and if we try to fill up the hollowness inside from external things, as you rightly point out, there is no way that's going to work. You have to actually fill it up from within. So we need to come back to the idea of what really is meaningful in life, what is really purposeful. How can we have more fulfilling lives in a deep kind of way? That is what we should be going. Absolutely.
Do you have any idea what would Buddha say in 2026 if he would see the social media world?
He would say, take your mobile phone, throw it in the nearest river. That's what he would say. Get rid of the mobile phone. This is one of the worst inventions in human history, right? It's kind of terrible. Walking down the streets in Warsaw. And Warsaw is like any other city in the world. Everyone is walking around with a mobile phone in their hand, or they have earbuds in their ears. And you can't even get in contact with people. That's absolutely impossible. Because I like to walk on the street and I like to say, Dzień dobry to people. I really enjoy that, to random people.
They must look at you like in a weird way.
They do, because I already look weird enough, right? I already look really strange already as it is. But I like that, because I kind of, there's something about making a human contact that is very powerful. When you do something to people that they don't expect, you make a nice connection, especially if you do it with a smile and you do it in a good way, then actually it's very powerful. People respect that and they respond to that. Or when I was I traveled to India quite often, because Buddhism started in India. So many of the holy sites of Buddhism are found in India. And parts of India are still very poor. And sometimes, one of the people who come with us, they give me a bag of sweets. And then I will go around and I will give it out to people, when I see them on the street. And you do it with a smile. You do it with a kindness. You don't do it with arrogance. If you're arrogant, it's terrible. You should never be arrogant to anyone in the world. Just because you have high social status or you're wealthy or whatever is no excuse for being arrogant. Arrogance is a stupid way of living in the world. How can you make a human connection with others if you place yourself above others? You can't. And so you go and you kind of give it out, and you can see, you smile to them and they smile back. At that moment, you make a human connection. And this idea of making human connection is one of those very important things that take you away from the superficial idea that we want people to look at us and to validate us and to praise us. Instead, we make a heart-to-heart connection that is truly meaningful in a deeper way. That is what is important. And the same thing, if you say Dzień dobry to people on the street, sometimes you make that connection, and that is very beautiful and very powerful. And the way I like to think of people, it's very easy to think that you are different. When you see me, you probably think, "Oh, who is this guy?" The first time you hear about the Buddhist monk, I don't know how you feel, but most people feel a bit uncomfortable around the Buddhist monk the first time. They feel a bit unsure. Can I do I have to do the right thing? What are the faux pas, and what should I be doing and not should be doing? But the truth is that you can't do anything wrong with a Buddhist monk, because one of the ideas of being a Buddhist monk is to be kind and compassionate. So it doesn't matter what you do. Even if you're going to rob me, there's nothing to rob, by the way, but if you're going to rob me, still I probably wouldn't get upset. So that's kind of the so you can relax, you can be at ease, and you can make a connection with people. And I love this idea of seeing others and realizing I could be that person. When I go on the street in India and I see these poor people, I could have been reborn here. And in the future, I may get reborn here. And the moment you see yourself in the other person, the distance between yourself and the other person gets taken away. If I see myself as you, as a female, as Polish, as a podcast host, whatever it is, a moment I can make a connection with you, and I can understand you in a very different way. If I see myself as anyone else in the world, I make a human connection, and that's very powerful.
You mentioned right now a really interesting topic. I must remember to go back to the question I wanted to ask, so I wrote it down. But you mentioned reborning, and I know that this is something what is, being totally honest, in Poland right now, especially in the world of podcasting, I feel like this is really big clickbait when you talk about reincarnation or like other forms of it. But I was reading about it yesterday a little bit in context of Buddhism, and it's slightly bit different from what I understand than the reincarnation we imagine. So I would like to ask you to explain it, how Buddhism see this, because the way I feel we see reincarnation is like you live, you die, and then you are born in like different body object, but it's kind of more like punishment or like kind of, I don't know, something, you did something good in your life, so then you are born as someone better or something better. And this feels a little bit odd to me as well. So I wanted to ask you how Buddhism see this concept of reborn, because this is also not the ultimate goal, what I understand, right?
So the Buddhist idea is basically, it is a little bit like you say. I wouldn't call it punishment, because I think the word punishment is not correct according to Buddhism. But the idea is that you have to receive the results of your actions. If you have actions, there will be results from those actions. And you know that from this life already, that this is true. If you are kind to somebody, you feel good about yourself. If you are nasty to somebody, you tend to feel bad about yourself afterwards. And that is really what karma in Buddhism is about. Yeah, this is all about karma. You feel good about yourself when you do good. You feel bad about yourself when you do bad. And if you accumulate a lot of bad things, and over time you start feeling really bad about yourself, you think about all those bad things and you kind of think, oh, what am I doing or whatever. If you do a lot of good things, it's like you are lifting yourself up. It's like your mind becomes brighter and lighter and you feel better about yourself. And so if you live a long life and all you do is good, at the end of your life, you have actually raised your consciousness up compared to where you started out when you were born into this world. You are a different person. And of course, if you are going to be reborn with a mind that is higher up than when you started out, you will be reborn at that new level. You will not be reborn where you started out in this life, but you will be reborn according to the new level that you have reached. And so because the mind tends to continue in the same way. And that is why when you have lived well, you get reborn in a good way because your mind is in a higher place.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And if you do a lot of bad, you accumulate the bad and you feel really low and bad, well, then you continue at that level when you die. And so it's not so much punishment or whatever. It's more like just a natural consequence of the way the mind works. And then you get reborn accordingly. However, from the Buddhist point of view, the whole idea of rebirth is very problematic. Because in the long run, you're going to have some good rebirths. In the long run, you're going to have some bad rebirths. In the long run, you don't know how you're going to be influenced. If you get reborn in a mafia family, you're going to have really bad influence and you're going to do many bad things. And so you get reborn in a bad place. And so in the end of the day, we are influenced by our environment. And because we're influenced by our environment, we end up doing good and bad things. And so we have good and bad rebirths. And when you start to look at this overall, you think, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I want to get out of this. I want to end the whole rebirth thing. And that is what Buddhism ultimately is about.
So what, because you just said right now, you want to end all this reborn thing. So what would that be? Is there anything that Buddhists says about it? Like, what is this end of the journey, one would say?
Yeah, it is the highest happiness. It's the end of suffering. Okay. Because as long as you keep on getting reborn in that process, you're just going to carry on suffering. You're going to die, you're going to get old, you're going to get sick, you're going to be separated from all you love and everything that is not nice. One of the problems in life is that we're always separated from things. We try to hold on because we attach to things, It's impossible not to attach to things, actually. You will attach to the people you love in your life. Of course you do. You will attach to the things that are important to you. It's impossible not to attach. But these things that you love and are important to you will also always be taken away from you at the latest when you die, sometimes before that. And this is kind of the nature of life, and that is inherently problematic. And so ending all of that, ending rebirth, is a profound liberation. Is the highest happiness that you can possibly have. If you have this kind of insights into the nature of reality, you will be blissed out beyond your wildest expectations. And then you make an end of everything, and that's the end of suffering.
Do you ever have the space to even think about the fact that if we are talking about being reborn, that today you are a monk? Do you ever wonder why? Who have you been in the past?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yes. This is what I wanted to. This is what I meant before when you asked about the real reason why I'm a Buddhist monk. Because
now you're getting back to it. I had to do a full circle, but I'm back. Okay,
so
great.
You're on the right track. Yes, I'm glad you came back to this. So I was saying about how I was feeling not really satisfied with my life, and I wanted something deeper. But one of the strange thing was when I went to Japan, I kind of recognized things. Well, why did I really recognize things? When I was a child, when I was maybe 12 years old or whatever, I had this idea, this fantasy of living by myself in the forest. How many children have that when you're 12 years old? I don't think it's a very common experience. And so I think at the end of the day, I think I was very likely a Buddhist, maybe a Buddhist monk, maybe a Buddhist nun. I don't know what it was in a past life. I think that is kind of why I have that recognition in this life. Why, born in Norway, living, I lived all over Europe basically as a child and as I grew up. Why would I be drawn to Buddhism? And I think that is the only explanation I can come up with, and why I also why I had, was interested in meditation from the very beginning here. But what is interesting about that to me is that when I saw the fact that I was probably a Buddhist monk in the past life or a Buddhist nun in the past life, when I saw that, I thought, well, this means I'm just following a habit. It's a habit from the past. So when people ask me, why are you a monk? I'm tempted to say, it's just a habit.
Yeah, because I understand.
And it is in a deep way. But then people will look at it and think, well, what are you talking about? What are you on? And what kind of drugs are you using? Because that sounds a bit weird. But what is interesting about, we are creatures of habits. We are following old habits from the past. And if you have lived in a certain way in the past life, those habits will be recreated in the present life, because the mind is a continuation. Your mind is a continuation in this life, and that continuation also goes from one life to the next one. It's the same kind of idea. And so then I thought, well, if it is a habit, habits are traps. Because habits are difficult to get out of. If I say, don't follow your habits of getting upset about this person when this person behaves in a certain way, you would know how difficult that is, because we tend to get upset when certain people behave in certain ways. We know what it's like to live in a family life. You live a family life when your parents tell you something, you get upset about it, or, because it is just a habit that we have. It is so deeply ingrained. And so I thought, well, if it is a habit that I'm a Buddhist monk, maybe it is a danger. Maybe I'm trapped by that habit. And so that made me think in a different way about being a monk. And I realized what I really have to do. I have to investigate these teachings in a very deep way. I have to know what I'm actually doing. I can't just go by habit. That is just too scary. And so what that led me to, and that was this journey of discovery. I learned some of the ancient language in which these scriptures are written down in, which is the Pali language. It's basically the same as Sanskrit, or very closely related to Sanskrit. I learned that. I learned to read that language. I read all the ancient Buddhist texts, both in Pali language and also in English translation several times, really to fully understand what is the Buddhist view of life, what is the kind of the Buddhist idea of how life actually exists. And that is when I started to feel confident I'm doing the right thing. And I realized, okay, it is a habit, maybe, but it's a good habit. And that's kind of where I came to.
This kind of makes this picture, for myself at least, so much bigger, because we live in those times where, and I'm not saying it's wrong, it's probably quite good, but we talk a lot about psychology. You also said that Buddhism, in a way, it's kind of similar, but we try to explain so many things, especially those difficult ones, those difficult habits which we have. We often try to explain through our childhood, which probably makes sense. But now I'm thinking, what if this is so much bigger, and the things that I'm doing today are not connected only purely to my parents, but maybe to someone who I was in the past lives.
Absolutely. This is a very, very important point. And I think that modern psychology, when we blame everything on our parents or whatever, actually is a very bad thing, because from a kind of a humanist point of view, we should be grateful to our parents. Our parents did a lot to us, and if we start blaming them and thinking they are the causes of all the problems that we have in life, very often we have the wrong attitude to them. We should try to forgive our parents for the mistakes. All parents make mistakes. That's impossible to be a parent not making mistakes.
I agree as a parent.
You agree as a parent? Okay, good. I'm glad. So we should forgive our parents, and we should have gratitude for what they did for us. They did a lot for us. They brought us up. They fed us. They did all of the things that are necessary, to get us alive and get us an education. And I know with my parents, I used to be very critical of my parents when I was young, when I was a teenager, but I've come to understand that actually I should have gratitude towards them instead for all the things that they did. And I had good parents, to be honest. On balance, they were good. And so this idea of rebirth, it changes the whole kind of understanding of this broader picture. And you realize that the person you are is not so much because of your parent, but because of who you were in a past life. In a sense, you have to take responsibility for the person you are.
That's very uncomfortable.
That is very uncomfortable, right? But there is an answer to that as well. And that is the answer that even if in one sense you are responsible, or you are what you are because of what you were in past lives, still you are also conditioned. In that past life, you were conditioned by other things. Yeah, you had other parents, you had another society, and so in a sense, you are not really responsible either, because all of the things that are around us are what condition us and make us who we are. It's just that it goes much deeper into the past than our present life. So ultimately, we are also not responsible. And that is kind of the good thing about this. Ultimately, we are formed by the things around us. But the idea of rebirth changes so many things in the world. So much of science, so much of psychology, so much of how we think about our existence, how we philosophize about it, is changed by this. And if we took this on board, and to me, it is just a reality. This is the way the world works. And if you misunderstand how the world works, this would be a classic example of that. Yeah, if you misunderstand it, let's say rebirth is true, just for the sake of the argument. If you misunderstand, you're going to give wrong ideas to people. You're going to kind of try to sort things out. And one of the ways of doing that is precisely by blaming your parents. Actually, it doesn't work. It's the wrong way of thinking about things. And so this is why the idea, one of the core ideas of Buddhism is the idea of right view, understanding the world in the right way. A very important part of that is the idea of rebirth. Once you bring that into the equation, it changes the idea of psychology, it changes the idea of the purpose and meaning of life, which is very, very important, obviously. And many, many more things would be changed because of that. And so it matters enormously.
But do you think that maybe for some people the motivation behind the believing in like rebirth or reincarnation is purely just fear? Because I'm thinking, it gives you this possibility of believing that, I will be alive again. And, we are humans, so I would argue that we are not considering the worst. I mean, we do in life, but I guess in this kind of case scenario, we are not really thinking, oh yeah, I will reborn as in some difficult circumstances. We kind of think probably like, okay, I will be reborn at least at the same level that I am right now, or better. So that kind of, I feel like that might answer this, not even a question, but this desire of like certainty that, I'm just not gonna disappear, die.
I know. Indeed, there are many reasons for believing in rebirth, and one of them is the fear of disappearing. Another one is this idea that they have in some of what they call the New Age religions, and where they have this idea that you are improving yourself in every life, and then eventually you reach kind of the ultimate highest thing. This is another kind of idea. And yes, I think these views are ultimately, they are mistaken. Still, I think it's better to believe in rebirth in that way than not to believe in rebirth at all, because at least you are on the right track. Yeah, you have a starting point, and then you can adjust that view afterwards to become more realistic. Or maybe I can have a bad rebirth. Yeah, maybe, and then you kind of get a more kind of a holistic view about things. And so, yes, I think you're right, but I think it's still a positive thing here.
Do you think that today, as people, like generally, of course, we got the whole concept of like happiness wrong? Because we spoke about happiness a few times already during this conversation, that it's kind of like ultimate goal. I mean, every person, like if you would go out on the street right now and ask someone, would you like to be happy? I no one is going to say no.
Of course, yeah.
We all want to be happy. Of course, for each and every person that might mean different things, but I'm guessing that we have kind of this misconception about happiness, because we also, it's going back to one of my first questions, we often connect happiness with possession of something or achieving something. I don't even know if we kind of know what happiness feels like.
Yeah, this is one of the problems, is that we don't know, and because we don't know, we can't really pursue it because we don't know what we're pursuing. We don't understand what we should really be looking for. And this is one of the reasons why it is so helpful to have a spiritual teacher. Yeah, this is kind of where that comes in. So you get someone like the Buddha arising in the world. And when the Buddha arises, the purpose of the Buddha is basically to awaken or to become enlightened. And that enlightenment is an enlightenment to what is happiness. That is the core idea of what that awakening is about. And so the Buddha, in the most profound way of thinking about the Buddha, is that he understands the difference between suffering and happiness, and he understands how to pursue the happiness and how to avoid the suffering. Yeah, and that goes, as you say, to the very heart of the human experience, the human desire. Everyone wants to be happy. No one wants to suffer. You just have to define the happiness in the right way, and so that's kind of why spiritual teachings are important and teachers are important. Yeah,
and yet I feel like we do everything to not be happy. I know it's so hard. I mean, living in Warsaw and having so many possibilities. I mean, I use my phone a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
I know it's not good for me. It's not that we don't know all of those things. I feel we do know, but there's big difference between knowing and doing. And it's kind of like we are working against us.
Yeah, I think there is a big difference between knowing and doing, because the knowing isn't deep enough.
Mm-hmm.
There are different levels of knowing. So you know superficially that your mobile phone is not going to be good for you, but you don't know it in a really deep way. If you knew it in a really deep way, you would throw it in the river, right? What is it called again, the river over here?
Vistula?
Vistula River, that's right. Vistula, I forgot the name. Yeah, so you go on the bridge and you chuck it inside. But so it's the depth of knowing that is the problem. And so this is one of the reasons why, when you first come to the spiritual path, you contemplate the teachings, you try to understand what it is about, and that is kind of how you deepen your knowledge at the very beginning, and you reflect on it. And if they are right, it kind of starts to sink into what is going on. Okay, so where is happiness to be found? Okay, all of these worldly things, they are unreliable, they are impermanent. Why am I holding on to all these impermanent, unreliable things? Let me try to find something more meaningful in my life. What is not so impermanent? Okay, if I build up good qualities inside, they are less impermanent. I am more in charge of my inner qualities. I cannot control the external world, but I can control my inner qualities to some extent. So let me work on those instead. It doesn't mean that you change your life fundamentally, but it means that you change your attitude to that life. Yeah. So you may still do the same job, you may still have the same family relations, you may still have the same hobbies or whatever, but now you do it, you imbue it with more kindness, you imbue it with more compassion, you imbue it with more of these good qualities, with more generosity or whatever. And then your ordinary life gets changed into a spiritual life. And that is really the critical thing here. But it comes from this idea of a right understanding, as you say, knowledge, but a deeper knowledge, more reflective attitude towards your life. The deeper that reflection goes, the more powerful your ability becomes to live accordingly.
Yeah, because, I'm guessing this is probably not realistic for like every single family to just leave the Warsaw right now and to go to live in the forest or like in the place where you don't have any social media or like phones and stuff. So it's kind of the matter of adjustment, I'm guessing, to the life we are already having. And that's where the next topic comes about, because this is the subject which I feel like we are, at least in the podcast world, constantly talking about and still not knowing a lot about. And that's meditation, because I feel like we all know now that meditation is helpful. We hear that we should do it. There is so many different teachers, apps. I feel like it's more and more of it, which I'm not so sure if it's helpful, because by the end of the day, you just kind of don't know what to choose and what to do. And we still don't know. I'm talking from my perspective. I still don't know how to do it, even though there's this whole knowledge in the world about it.
Yeah. Okay. So it is true. It is quite. It can be quite challenging here, and it's not challenging because it is difficult. It's not like a mathematical equation or anything like that. It is challenging because our mind goes in the wrong direction. That's why it's challenging. It's more like a psychological challenge than a kind of difficulty challenge. And so, the typical way that you will be told to meditate is you'll be told to watch your breath or something like that, do the breath meditation. And that is true. It is a very powerful meditation technique, or technique is the wrong word, a meditation subject. Yeah, you want kind of going with your breath. However, it can also be very uncomfortable. I don't know if you have ever kind of experienced that. You try to watch your breath and you have to use your will to stay with the breath because the mind doesn't want to be with the breath. And sometimes you are able to hold on and then the whole thing becomes tight and uncomfortable and unpleasant. And many people have an unpleasant experience because they cannot be with it in a natural way. There's too much force, there's too much willpower. And so what I would say to people is that don't think about meditation. Don't even use the word meditation, because the moment you use the word meditation, you get all of these strange ideas in your mind, staying with the breath, holding on with willpower or whatever. So think about meditation in an entirely different way here, because what meditation really is, it is relaxation. And everyone wants to relax, and you know how to relax. Well, how do you relax? Well, after a long day in your podcast studio or whatever it is, after working really hard or whatever kind of work you have, sometimes you may feel quite tired, you may feel quite drained, And when you feel really tired and drained, you want to go to your favorite chair, maybe these chairs here, whatever, and you just sit back and just, wow, okay, nice. Or maybe you go to your bed and you lie down on your bed for a short time. What do you do when you relax like that? Nothing.
Just nothing.
Exactly, nothing, right? That is what meditation is. And so the moment you sit back and you relax, you don't do anything. That is what meditation is. And so you sit there, you don't do anything. And what happens when you don't do anything is that your energy starts to come back after a while. Your tiredness leaves you and the energy comes back. Then when your energy comes back, what you do? Well, then you get up and you start doing something else. Well, that's where you go wrong, you see. That's where you go wrong, because that's when meditation starts. Once your energy comes back, you carry on sitting instead of getting up. And you carry on sitting in the same way with the same kind of attitude of relaxation. And then the relaxation goes deeper. And it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. You don't allow the thinking mind to take over. You don't allow the next job that you're supposed to do to come into your mind. You take the meditation in a deeper way. And if you really relax fully, you stop thinking altogether, because thinking is a result of the activity of the mind. You want to think. It is one of those terrible things to tell people, but whenever you think something, actually, that you want to think that thought. People don't like that because some of our thoughts are not that good.
Nice.
It's not so nice. And so, am I responsible? Oh, I don't really want to take responsibility. And in one way, you're not responsible because it is conditioning, but in one way, it comes from your intentions. And so when you really relax, actually you stop thinking, because that driving force in the mind that drives the thinking process is relaxed away. Now you're enjoying. You're not doing anything anymore. And so this is what real relaxation is about. So we have to understand real deep relaxation. And I would recommend anyone who's listening to this podcast, when you go, instead of going to a holiday to a nice place, I don't know where people in Poland go to holidays from, maybe they go to Spain or to Southern Europe.
Greece,
Whatever. So instead of going on those kind of holidays, and sometimes you go on those holidays and you come back even more tired, because it's so busy and so many things happening.
Especially if you go with children.
Especially if you go with children, there you are, exactly. It's very exhausting. And so the real holiday actually happens in meditation practice. If you want to go on a real holiday and you really want to relax and you really want to enjoy yourself, that is far more relaxing, far more enjoyable than any external holiday in the world. Only, of course, if you know what you're doing, but if you know what you're doing, then it becomes really powerful. And so meditation is basically an idea of relaxation, and you have to know how to relax properly. And as you do that, it starts to work. So how can we relax properly? That's the next thing, because you'll find that actually you can't. You try to relax fully like that, and the mind just goes on. The mind keeps on thinking. You have a project, you have something that you need to do. You think, especially if you are a mother or a father of young children or whatever, you're going to have hundreds of things that you need to do all the time. And so you need to let go of that for a short while. And one of the ways of letting go of that comes back to what I was saying before about right view, understanding what actually is really important in life. we tend to focus on the wrong things as important. We tend to think that if we kind of get that problem out of the way and we get this thing out of the way, then we can relax and we can kind of then we have a bit of time for ourselves or whatever. The problem is that the problems of the world never stop. They just go on. There's always one other problem behind the current problem. And so you go on solving problems, solving problems, solving problems, solving problems, and then you die. And then when you die, you get reborn. And when you get reborn, you start solving problems again and problems. And you never get anywhere. You just keep on solving problems like this. This is one of the scary things about the idea of rebirth. You just keep on doing the same thing again and again and again until you realize that the only way out of this is actually the spiritual path. And one of those spiritual paths that I think is the most profound one is the Buddhist spiritual path coming from the Buddha. And when you realize that, and you realize this in a deep way, you realize, actually, I should not get up to solve problems. I should not get up to do the million things I have to do. I should relax instead, because this is the spiritual practice. If I really want to change my life, if I want to elevate myself to a higher level, become a better person in a deep and profound way, this is what I should be doing here. And once that right view sinks in, actually, yeah, let me relax. And you keep on relaxing. And then you become really irresponsible. You forget about your kids, you forget about your work, you forget about everything, and you just enjoy life instead. And you kind of really relax deeply. This is one way of thinking about this. Yeah. And then what you find, suddenly the breath is there, because you are relaxing. You are becoming mindful. You're becoming clear about the present. And suddenly the breath is just there. And you find yourself watching the breath. You thought, wow, what this happens like a miracle out of the blue. You never tried to watch it. The breath kind of comes to you instead. It's a completely different way of looking at things. So this is the first way I would encouraged to do meditation. There is more, and I will come back to those later on. But I'll give you a chance to interject, because I'm talking a lot now. So
yeah, that's amazing. But that makes so much more sense, because I feel like we look at meditation, most of us, not everyone, of course, but myself, as a next challenge. And then when you think about it as a challenge, there comes also a pressure. Like I'm this kind of person, that if I cannot do it, and that's what mostly happens when I try to meditate. I'm like, okay, this doesn't work. I think about something, I clearly cannot do it, and I'm get just more and more frustrated with myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm not looking at it as the form of relaxation, as you explained, but as the next thing that I have to achieve.
Yeah.
So it kind of add up to all of those other things which we do have to achieve in life.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a very good point. And this is how most people approach meditation, as something that you have to do, something you have to achieve. And so we kind of engage the doer, I'm going to do this, and we're getting it exactly the wrong way around. You're not supposed to do the meditation. The meditation happens to you. It's a very different way of thinking about it. Yeah, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to be the passive recipient of the meditation. I'm going to receive the meditation. Thank you, universe, for giving me this meditation. Yeah, whatever. And so you just sit back and you enjoy the process. And being the passive observer, enjoying the process, is really what meditation is about. Allowing meditation to happen to you rather than you doing the meditation.
So what would be the next stages? Because you mentioned them, and we have this idea of monks meditating for days and months, and from our perspective, it's this is impossible. I mean, these days you cannot sit still for 5 minutes. You can unfortunately see that in children as well. I was reading about that, I think today on Instagram, that there is this.
That's why I can't be still, because I'm reading Instagram.
That's the thing. But but it's true that this generation, for example, my daughter, she's 4 years old right now, they really cannot do nothing, because they are living in this world, they are born to this world that you constantly are stimulated by something. So the idea of meditating for hours even is kind of science fiction for us. So what are the next steps?
So what you have to do is that very often when we say things are impossible, is because it's very hard for us to imagine how it can be done. Just like you're saying now, but it's not like it's impossible. It's just that you have to take baby steps. You start, and as you start, the possibility opens up. That's how it works. And so what you thought was impossible sometimes looks a little bit less impossible until eventually it becomes possible. It's like there's an ancient Chinese proverb, which is that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And this is where you can actually walk 1,000 miles, but you have to get started. If you don't get started, it's never going to happen. But once you get started, it will happen. And that's the same thing with meditation. You just have to get started, and somehow then you find your way. You find your way through this because it has been done before. Other people do it. If other people can do it, you can do it. Everyone can do it, because we are human beings. Human beings are the same. We have minds, we have bodies, and those minds and bodies work in the same way. We are basically, there's no fundamental difference between you and I, or between anyone in this world. And so you just have to get started. If the Buddha could get enlightened, we can get enlightened.
Was it difficult for you at any time, like in the beginning, or was it, since we agreed that there is a big chance that you were a monk in the past life, or was it like always easy?
Never. No, it was never. It was easy, sometimes difficult at other times. So one of the things that makes it possible is a feeling that you are succeeding. The feeling that something is happening. You're starting to understand what is going on. And the most important thing in Buddhism is a feeling that your good qualities as a person are increasing and your bad qualities are going down. This is the entire purpose of the spiritual practice. Because if you keep increasing your good qualities and you keep going down with your bad qualities, eventually you're going to get something pretty remarkable. If you stop, then of course it stops. But if you keep on going like that, eventually you will hit some kind of jackpot down the track or whatever. I shouldn't use gambling metaphors because that's kind of bad.
How do we know that this is just metaphor?
It's true. So you keep on doing that. And so that is the most important point. And if you feel that, then you feel a sense of purpose. You feel a sense of goal. You feel a sense of aim. You feel that your life is meaningful. And so for me, that has been kind of the driving force. So whenever I had difficulties in my monastic life, whenever I thought, I had enough, maybe I should disrobe, because as a monk, you're allowed to disrobe in Buddhism. It's not a vow you have for life. If you want to disrobe, you can disrobe. And so I thought, maybe this is enough. Maybe I should kind of have a more ordinary life, find a nice girlfriend or have a nice house somewhere and just kind of enjoy myself or whatever. But I never really believed it. Deep down, I knew it was a fake kind of reality. The deeper reality, you need something much more important. And I looked at my progress over the years. I thought, this is actually going somewhere. I know that an ordinary life is not going to actually go anywhere. And that is always the thing that kind of kept me going. And so that is the critical thing. Are you improving in that way? If you are, then you will always carry on.
But do you think that those two things can coexist? I mean, the kind of being, we are living in the materialistic world. So like, obviously most of people in here, like in Poland, they will have some apartment, like rented or bought, never mind. Like they will have some kind of car, they will have some kind of clothes, like, because, I'm this kind of person, I guess, that I go full on or not at all. And I feel like what I'm asking is, can you be growing spiritually without completely cutting off? Because it's kind of impossible in the world, again, we are living.
Absolutely. Of course, absolutely you can. And this is exactly what you should do. Cutting off completely is silly. It doesn't work that way. You can cut off completely, but it should come after a long period of contemplation and reflection, a long period of already starting out. And then you should feel, I really want to do this. When you come to the point that actually, I really want to cut these things off, then is the right time. But if you come from more like an idea in your mind, the Buddha said I should do it, I better do it or whatever, then it's not going to work. And so absolutely you do it starting with where you are. And then where you start is you start very gently with yourself. Okay, meditate 15 minutes a day. Yeah, 15 minutes is enough. 15 minutes enough to feel a little bit of peace, a little bit of calm. And it's enough that almost anyone can do it. Some people can still not do it. One of the things I always say, don't do it if it is very painful or very difficult for you, then you should not do it. And you can do many other things. Remember that the spiritual path is much more than meditation practice. Spiritual path is about the quality of your person. How are you? How do you relate to other people? Are you kind? Are you ethical? Are you generous? Do you have compassion for other people? All of these things are very important spiritual qualities. And if you don't have those spiritual qualities, your meditation is not really going to work anyway. So you have to do those things. And those things you can do all the time. Yeah. I mean, when we are sitting down here, we can talk to each other in a respectful and kind way, or we can shout at each other and kind of get at each other's throat, whatever. Yeah. And so we always have that choice throughout the day on how to live in the right way. And so so in that sense, the spiritual path becomes part of your life in a sense, because you understand that, even with your children, right? How do you want to be with your children? Do you want to be a good mother, I presume? Yeah, you want to be kind. So the spiritual path can be brought into the idea of being a mother. Yeah, or being a wife, or being a daughter, or being a son, or being whatever. Yeah, we can bring the spiritual path into all aspects of our life. Then it becomes powerful, but it begins with those basic ideas. Then meditation comes. Then there comes a point when you may want to go on a retreat. Yeah, you go on a 5-day meditation retreat. That's kind of really exciting the first time you do that.
It sounds amazing even for me, but it's probably because it's so exotic, from where I stand.
It's great fun. Yeah, a lot of people do it these days. A lot of people in Poland do it. Polish people seem to be really interested in these kind of things. I'm amazed that Poland is, lots of interest in Buddhism in Poland, which is kind of remarkable and really, really cool. And going on the retreat, you start with a short retreat, then maybe later on you go with a long one, yeah? And so gradually you move. You go with what feels natural, yeah? You develop the path in a natural way. You don't force yourself. Forcing yourself is the same thing as forcing yourself in meditation. It tends to lead to problems if you do that.
You just mentioned Poland right now, and this is something what I mentioned before we started recording, that this is really interesting that first of all, we are sitting here talking about Buddhism. Second of all, I know there's a big conference in November taking place, and that, you told me that there's many tickets sold. There are also, from what I know, the meditation centers being built in Poland. So that's kind of, I would say that a couple of years ago, that seemed impossible or like kind of pointless, because you would think that no one would be interested in it. Yeah. Do you think, maybe not only in Poland, but in Europe itself, are we currently experiencing some kind of spiritual shift? Because it feels like something is changing.
Yeah. I think maybe we are. And I think this comes back to this idea that there was a kind of a crisis in meaning and people need something more. It's very interesting for me that Poland seems to be one of the places where Buddhism is in Europe is most powerful right now, which is kind of very fascinating. Yeah. And I've asked myself, why is that the case? And I think that one of the reasons is that Polish people, in a sense, already, because of the Catholic faith, are quite spiritual, actually. Western Europe, people kind of lost their faith already quite a long time ago, several decades ago. And the Protestant church, I was born in Norway, it's a Lutheran church. It's kind of a very dry, boring kind of spirituality. It doesn't have a deep, but Catholicism is more alive. You have monastics, you have monks and nuns who practice deeply. And many of the things that the monks and nuns do in the Catholic Church are basically meditation. Yeah, they may pray to God, they may give it a different name or whatever. Sometimes they call it meditation as well, and they achieve states that are parallel to what we achieve in Buddhism. Joy, happiness, a sense of unity with the kind of the universe and these kind of things. And so there is a very strong spiritual tradition in Poland already. So I think people already have an inclination towards that. But then I think they are also a bit disappointed at the same time with the Catholic Church.
That's what I wanted to say, that I feel like there's so many people. I mean, I don't even think it's, sorry to interrupt you, but I think there are even like the statistics about it, how many people left the church itself.
Yeah.
And they are not very happy about the Catholic church. So I'm guessing they are searching even more than atheists for something else.
That's exactly what I think. And I think that combination of having a spiritual outlook, but also being a bit disappointed with the Catholic Church means that you're looking for that spiritual need somewhere else. And then you kind of come maybe to Buddhist teachings. So this is one reason. Another reason is that there are some people here in Poland who I know who have been very good at advertising the Buddhist teachings through their websites and these kind of things, and they have done a really, really good job with that. And so they have created a accessibility to Buddhist teachings. And some of these Buddhist teachings that they have made available on the internet have been downloaded millions of times in Poland. Yeah, millions of times. And so that means that there is a need, there is a sense of thirst for spiritual teachings. And that is now kind of coming together in the last few years, coming together in Poland to the point where, you can have large conferences. I just heard 2,500 tickets have been sold to this conference. Talking about building up monasteries, building retreat centers, all of these kind of things is kind of now coming together in a very powerful and beautiful way here.
This is this good part about having the internet in social media, because you mentioned in the beginning that when you were trying to find something, you had to go through the books with the numbers and all that stuff. Like here is like these days is so much more accessible, because even if you don't have it like itself in the city, you can access it online. And this is also some kind of some form of like having this kind of information. And that also is bringing me to this subject, which we also touched before we started recording, that before that, when I was a teenager, or like I was going to school, I guess there was not even any other option rather than being either atheist or Catholic. Because, I mean, obviously you could learn yourself, like teach yourself from the books, but I don't think any 15, 16-year-old, unless have some kind of, spiritual, I don't know.
Unless you were a monk in the past life.
Something like you had, but this is exception. We'll do that, so, and it was like that till now pretty much, that at school you can learn only about the Catholic religion. So you kind of don't see the broader picture, and you don't, even if you would like to do something, you kind of don't know how to do it. So having this space on internet, it makes everything easier.
I agree with you. And I think this is one of the great things about our modern society, is that all the various spiritual traditions are available to us. We can contemplate them deeply. We can compare them to each other. We can think about what is really useful. There is competition in the spiritual market, and you have to present your ideas in a way that makes sense to people.
Is that difficult though for like someone like you?
No, it's incredibly important. This is one of the things about if you are a Buddhist monk, one of your jobs is to sell the Buddhism. That's one of my jobs. Of course I'm going to, and of course I want to sell it. I think Buddhism is incredibly important. I think the Dhamma, the teaching of the Buddha, is the meaning of life. Literally, this is the meaning of life. How can I not, sell it to others? I don't want to convert others, because I'm not interested in conversion. What I'm interested in is selling an idea, and those people who agree, they can come on board. I'm not interested in those people who don't agree. Please, no need to, that's fine. Of course, you don't have to agree. But I want to at least make it available to the world. And if it is available, then people can choose appropriately. I'm not interested in conversion, because Buddhism is not a religion of conversion. And this is what is fascinating about that, is that this is actually very similar to the way the world was at the time of the Buddha. We often think that the world is always advancing, always going to a better place. We're always becoming more better at science and technology, and of course we are to some extent. But there are certain things that were better 2,500 years ago, and one of those things is this idea of all kinds of spiritual traditions vying with each other for the attention of people, competing with each other, having discussions and arguments, and kind of finding out who actually has the best teaching. And that is the way it was at the time of the Buddha. There wasn't any kind of Catholic church that had the monopoly of everything. There was a large number of religions, all kind of, debating and arguing with each other. And now we finally, after 2,500 years, finally coming back to that kind of place again.
That's what I wanted to say, that probably the selling itself it's not a thing of the modern world, because I'm guessing we are just using different outlets for it right now, but I'm guessing that was exactly what was happening, like you mentioned, like 2,500 years ago. It was just probably more of like word of mouth and stuff like that, because obviously that was probably the only thing, but it did exist. And I think it's kind of what you said. I think now, because of the accessibility, we just see all of those possibilities, because possibilities as different religions. And now we kind of know that we have a choice. So we are not, forced to go and be the part of the Catholic Church if we don't feel like this is our place. So this is really interesting, and it also probably correlate a lot with this feeling of like being unsettled and unhappy and empty, and we are searching just for meaning in life, I guess.
No, absolutely. And so yes, I can only agree with what you're saying.
I wanted to ask about something really universal. We spoke a lot about happiness, but the things which very often correlate with happiness that we always mention is love. What does Buddhism say about love itself?
Okay, so there are kind of different kinds of love. There are love which is limited and love which is unlimited. And there is love which is more like a romantic kind of love, where you love a particular person, and you feel good about that. And there is love which is not based on romanticism, but it's a love for like a child or another human being who is a friend or something like that. So different kinds of love. And the kind of love that we are seeking in Buddhism or in practicing meditation or whatever is this kind of idea of universal love. It is different from romantic love, which is attachment to a person, but the idea of a universal love. And you can call that friendliness, you can call it love, and call it whatever it is, but it's an attitude you have to other people. It means seeing their good qualities. It means embracing them. It means having compassion for them rather than judging them, or rather than kind of excluding them from your heart, or excluding them from your social circle or whatever. And so in Buddhism, we can practice that. We practice it in daily life simply by being friendly with people, by the way we speak to them, but also by the way we think about people. Instead of getting angry and being judgmental about people, we have compassion, because we understand that even if people behave badly, very often it's because of their suffering inside. It's because they have problems in their life, or they have been conditioned in a bad way, through society or through their parents or through whatever. And so they are not ultimately responsible. And if they're not ultimately responsible and they do stupid things that lead to their own suffering, you're going to have compassion for them. You can't really judge them anymore. And so we change our attitude. We think about the world in an entirely new way. And then you can bring this into your meditation practice. First of all, you act with love and friendliness by body and speech. You act with friendliness in the way you think about people. Then you bring it into your meditation. And one of the things I actually wanted to say earlier is that meditation does not have to be breath meditation or just relaxing in the present. It can be what we call loving kindness meditation.
Okay.
And loving kindness meditation is a very simple idea of like using a mantra in your meditation. Something like, may all beings be happy, may all beings be well. So the meditation starts in the same way. You start by relaxing, making yourself peaceful, making yourself calm, kind of being present in the, as present as you can be, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then you can just spend a short time using this kind of mantra. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. And meaning it. You have to mean it. If you don't mean it, it's not going to work. You can't just say it like a parrot. It has to come from your heart. And then when you say it, meaning it, after a while, it gives sense to this very beautiful feeling, because you want the whole world to be happy. That's a very powerful thing, and you don't exclude anyone. So you kind of, it's like you go out and out and out until the whole universe is kind of included in this kind of thing. And so you ultimately, you bring it out. The whole universe is included. And this is where very, very profound states of meditation can happen through this idea of love, where the whole universe is part of your meditation experience. And you can go into states of meditation that are extremely blissful based on that particular idea. So universal love means universal acceptance. It means non-judgmentality. It means accepting people for who they are. It means it's the most wonderful thing we can give to other people is accepting them for who they are, because we tend to make demands on other people. We want them to be in a certain way. Yeah? The reason why we get attached to someone in a romantic relationship is because we think they are a certain kind of person, yeah, and we love those qualities about them. And then it turns out actually they had other qualities after all. And then we want to change them a little bit. We don't want them to be exactly like that. But that is not really love. Then you are making demands. Accepting someone for exactly who they are is a kind of love for others, because you accept them. Acceptance is love. And sometimes you find that you are in the presence of somebody who is a very loving kind of person, who has enormous kind of kindness or whatever. I have had some of those experiences with kind of great monastics, yeah, who kind of, you feel when you are with them, they accept you 100%. It's such a beautiful feeling, because when they accept you 100%, you accept yourself 100%. And when you accept yourself 100%, it means you can relax. You don't have to be anybody. You don't have to pretend to be someone you are not. You can just, I can just relax. Don't have to say anything. There's no pressure to talk, yeah. When you meet a stranger, you feel a pressure to talk with them because, you have to communicate, right? But if you're like that, no pressure to talk. Yeah, you can just sit with this person. You cannot have to say anything at all. There's no pressure to be anything. It's a beautiful experience. So love means that other people feel at ease in your presence, and you kind of create this beautiful atmosphere around you. This is very much what it is. And so I would recommend anyone who listens to this podcast, if they're interested in meditation, to try some loving kindness meditation. Yeah, metta meditation. This idea, may all beings be happy and well, because that is an easier kind of meditation than the breath meditation, because you're actively doing something here. And there's lots of information about this to be had on the internet. There are guided meditations where people will tell you what to do, guide you. That is very, very helpful, because in the beginning you feel a bit out of your depth. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, that sounds helpful.
Yeah, so use that guided meditation at least in the beginning to kind of get you started. And then after a while, you can, you become your own master of these meditations.
I feel like the acceptance is something that we all need a lot in this world right now. And also when you spoke about it and talked about this enormous kind of love and acceptance, I thought, and this is not the first time that I think that today, but I didn't say it out loud, is that all of those virtues are very, very similar to a little children. Because I feel like, especially at the very beginning, they naturally all have that. They accept you as a parent, as you are. They don't care, how you look and what you say and what you possess.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting that, and I find this as a mother as well, that there's so many things that, especially very young children, can teach us and show us, not even knowing about it.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point, and I think that it also shows the potential inside of us. Yeah, we have that potential is there. Many people may think that loving everyone sounds like way beyond my league. It's kind of too difficult. But actually, but you can do it. This is the point. And again, it's about taking baby steps. Talking about young children taking baby steps. Yeah. So you start out, and that potential is inside. We all have deep inside of us. We have that love. It's just a matter of bringing it out into the world. And once you bring it out into the world, then it just grows naturally, stage by stage, and then you can actually achieve it. You can achieve this idea we called universal loving kindness in Buddhism, where no one is actually excluded.
Is there anything, there's plenty of stuff, I'm guessing, but is there anything that I didn't ask today during this conversation about Buddhism and everything we spoke about that you think that it's important to add to our conversation today?
I think one of the kind of fundamental values of Buddhism as well is to have an inquiring mind. to inquire about the world, not to be too sure about things, to be humble. Because one of the things I find on the internet these days are people often too sure of themselves.
Yes.
And that is a very bad idea, because in truth, in reality, it's very hard to be sure about anything, really. Things are very fluid. Things are very uncertain.
There's this saying, something along the line that, the more you know, then more you realize that you don't know anything,
right?
And it kind of works like that.
Yeah, there was a saying in the Dhamma, and the Buddha said that the person who understands their ignorance, they are at least wise to that extent. But the ignorant person who thinks that they're wise, they are completely ignorant. They have no idea. And so it is very important to understand your own limitations, and that is what humility is about: understanding your own limitations. And if you think of yourself that you are much more than you actually are, how are you going to learn anything? You can't learn because you think you know already. And if you think you know already, you're blocking off the possibility of learning. So be more humble than many people on the internet are. Follow the great spiritual masters in the world. Don't be too concerned about what the world thinks about you. We are too concerned about the praise and blame of the people in the world. But actually, people in the world don't understand. They don't understand what is worthy of praise, what is worthy of blame. And why do we care so much about if other people praise us, if they don't really understand anyway? What we should be concerned about is what the great spiritual masters, would they blame you? Would they praise you? And if they would praise you, that's what matters. And if you are a good person living in a good life, then generally speaking, the great spiritual master would praise you. They would say, well done. You're living a good life. And so let's get away from all of these things, or whether we are accepted by other people, or whether we are popular or unpopular, or whether we are, all of these things are so superficial, and we should have more integrity in our life. We should know deep down what is true, and we should pursue that truth. And if you always pursue the truth, what is real, then you're going to go a very long way on the spiritual path. Always ask questions. Always pursue the truth. If you do those two things, you're going to go a very long way in your life. And then based on those two things, you can then check out the various spiritual teachings, and then you can make your choices about what you want to do.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us with all this knowledge and information. Would you have any advice just to end this conversation if someone wants to find out more about Buddhism, because obviously we just touched the surface today. Where would you send them to?
I would send them to, there is a Polish website if you want to learn Buddhism in Poland called Theravada.pl, which is Theravada, Theravada.
I will put in the description box.
.pl, and that has Dhamma in Polish language. Go there, and that is a very, very good place to start. And then you can kind of move on from there as you see fit.
Thank you so much for being here.
You are very welcome.
Thanks.